Good morning. It's the 9th of March 2023. This is Roger here, aka Tone Freaks in Hallandsåsen, in the south part of Sweden. Beautiful sunny day with snow on the ground. So in the description to this video, I just cut and pasted this from this blog, which I did on the April the 19th, 2022. So just a little less than a year ago. So I said this: one of the things which computers are good at doing is starting from where they left off, always assuming that they've not crashed or their memory has not been wiped in between the shutting them down, sleeping, putting them on pause, whatever, or having been left unattended for some time and not updated or whatever. Now, computers and assistant to human memory are not a bad thing. And when I turned mine on this morning, I restored the browser pages from my previous session. I tend to keep many tabs open in at least two windows. One window for current research tasks, another window for longer term strategic business project planning, etc. So the rest of this blog is going to go on to that window last April. And then we're going to look through those windows, and then I'm going to look at the blog I did this morning. So just that there, you can see in the thing at the bottom, that's my second screen. And this is my other screen. So there we are. This is my little man cave. Just make sure I'm in shot there. So, what's the purpose of going through these blogs about a year apart, and then looking at the blog I did today? Well, it's really to get some context. And a year ago, the Ukrainian war had started. That was the 24th, 25th of February. And it took a lot of people by surprise that the Russian Federation, whose president is Vladimir Putin, actually invaded. Cynical people like me thought that their press reports of the massing of troops, etc., was just a way of getting people to worry, and then blow me, it actually happened. Now that's an interesting thing in itself. Some people would sort of say, oh, maybe that's like that old tale about crying wolf or whatever, Peter and the Wolf, I think, which, funnily enough, I think that is a Russian fairy tale. But that happened, and then, of course, it's still ongoing. And for me personally, I don't like war. I think the military-industrial complex is a thing, and I do think that I tend to agree with Eisenhower's speech at the end of his presidency, this 1961 speech in which he warned against the military and industrial complex. It's a shame we didn't pay attention back then. But let's just go through this now. So the first window that opened on that morning of the 19th of April 2022 was this one, which is, we just open that there, this window here. So this is the mind map of what I call the going direct paradigm, and there are a series of episodes of Politics and Empire, which is a YouTube channel, which is also on BitChute and all of the other, I think, Rumble and what have you. And this is the interview with Thierry Meyssan, where he says the goal of the Ukraine conflict is to economically collapse Europe. That's a shocking claim, I think, for most of us. Would that benefit Russia? Bearing in mind that at the time, West Germany, or Germany, not West Germany anymore, but Germany was a big customer of its gas and oil exports through Nord Stream, etc. But within this mind map here on Geopolitics and Empire, there are a number of interviews. I'd recently discovered that channel, and there were a number of interviews which I listened to, which I some from people I'd heard of. Piers Robinson, he's a media academic in the UK that's been heavily critical of things like the white helmets in Syria. Martin Armstrong, the economics person that developed a model, got sent to prison for gold bullion offences, gold coins. Whitney Webb, whose star has been rising quite a lot. Johnny Vedmore, similar. Dmitry Orlov, he's an interesting one. Daniel McAdams works for Ron Paul. Dennis Rancourt, Canadian academic physicist. Anyway, you can see there are quite a number of them. You can scroll down, you see James Corder, CJ Hopkins, Patrick Wood, Paul Craig Roberts. It may be that some of these are familiar to you, others won't be. Paul Craig Roberts, Corey Morningstar, you know, and so it goes on. There's a whole range. This guy here, Ugo Bardi, who I personally think is mad, but you know, he's interviewed in there as well. G. Edward Griffin. But anyway, Thierry Meyssan is the one that is relevant for today, because I mentioned him actually in my blog today as well, which I'll come to. So that's the going direct paradigm. That's that first link. If you click to that, these tabs up here are sort of main nodes, and then they link to various different things. So let's just have a look. Right, so Brain Builder. So I built this brain. Here I am up here, Roger Lewis, and this history blueprint inspired this history blueprint model done by Richard Grove, who was an early 9/11 whistleblower. He brought to attention, as did another guy called Mike Rappaport, to strange market trading in the stock market, whatever, people shorting various stocks, airline stocks particularly, ahead of the 9/11 event. Of course, the title of this blog is from 9/11 to Nord Stream, and both events, we don't really know who did them, or, you know, there's a plausible deniability. Robert Zekolo comes in that sort of idea of plausible deniability, and you know, so it goes on, and it links to a few other people, UK Column, Ian Crane, and Ardha, Monopoly through World Economic Forum, and there are a number of themes that do keep cropping up in my blogs, references that I go back to that I found stood the test of time. Ian Crane, particularly in yesterday's blog, Ian Crane's Humanity and Insanity interviews with William Engdahl, for instance, and also his 2007 talk, which was on peak oil, myth or reality. A very good talk. And these are all issues that feed into where we are today, no further forward, actually considerably further backwards if you're a trying to live your life, pursuing health, wealth, happiness, whatever. Anyway, let's just get back to the other windows as they came up. So that's the web brain. So I saved the front page at the time of the Geopolitics and Empire podcast, interviews, whatever, and this shows the top interviews at the time and the most recent ones. So on the 15th of April, Thierry Meyssan is interviewed, and it's well worth looking at. And that's the statement I said about the goal of the Ukraine conflict is to economically collapse Europe, which was Thierry Meyssan's thing. So Stephen Mosher, the pandemic was intended to get us to accept the social credit system. Jeremy Kuzmarov, oligarchy is creating a truly dystopian social order. William Engel, that's not to be confused with William Engdahl. We must embody the values of love, truth, and freedom. C.J. Hopkins, Globocap is clearing and holding, rooting out resistance, implementing a new program. And then Dan Kovalik, Ukraine invasion marks dramatic beginning of multipolar world. And then the top ones at the time, Francis Boyle, James Corbett, Dennis Rancor, Mark Serkis, and Dr. Igor Shepard. So let's just open that channel now and see how that's changed a year later. So video, so March the 7th, 2023, Emmanuel Daniel says the US will pull another 1971 and launch world into metaverse. Adam Stolberg says on Russian red lines, failure of sanctions and energy losing potency as a weapon. Etienne de la Boetie, we're ruled by intergenerational organized crime. On my blog today, we're going to get to the Mike Hill and Brendan O'Connell interview from a few days ago, intergenerational organized crime. Well, that's going to be an interesting one to go back and watch. Alex Thompson, who was on, he was on UK column yesterday. Both East and West are interested in World War III or an eternal penumbra of doomsday. So anyway, so here we see Francis Boyle has been relegated from the most popular interview. He's down one to number 2, and up to number 1, or at number 1, is Thierry Bourdet. We must develop more courage to counter globalism. James Corbett down from number 2 to number 3. Gonzalo Lira, American power has collapsed. It's pulling down the rest of the world. So he's come in at number 4, and Dennis Rancourt is now down at number 5. So that's just as they appear on the screen. I mean, it goes all the way down here to who else we got? Francis Boyle is also at number 9, as well as at number 2. Patrick Wood is at number 10. Is that right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, so that's the top 10 most viewed of geopolitics and empire. Anyway, that's an interesting enough exercise. So here's the Thierry Meyssan interview, and the goal of the Ukraine conflict is to economically collapse Europe, and this is something he said in that interview on the 15th of April 2022. Okay, so this is the blurb which the interviewer says. Thierry Meyssan shocked the world with his first 9/11 Truth books. His effroyable imposture in March 2002, 9/11 The Big Lie, and a sequel, Pentagaze. In the 1990s, he was a national secretary of a French radical party which held seats in the government, founder of the Voltaire Network, major alternative international press agency. I mean, you can read all this yourself. And then there are several links to the Voltaire net. And these are pages on Voltaire net, which I pulled up because there were various individuals that Mason mentioned who he calls the Straussians. And so this is people like Paul Wolfowitz, Richard Pearl, and he mentions the conflict. We get further down here. No, the Holmidor is mentioned. I mean, there's a whole theme here. You sort of tie it all together. Right, so let's just read this. In the US, you discover this. People with Paul Wolfowitz was a direct disciple from Leo Strauss. He was a number 2 in the Pentagon during George Bush, the son. And you know also Daniel Pearl. That guy was an advisor of the Pentagon, but he was also, before that, the man who organized the war in Yugoslavia. He was a special advisor for all political affairs to President Izetbegovic in Bosnia's government, when at the time Osama bin Laden was advisor to Izetbegovic for military affairs. At the same time, Pearl and bin Laden in the same government doing the same politics. Now, that parallel, that war, another NATO war, and the Ukraine war, they're very real parallels here. In terms of getting some context here, both over time, just a year, but going back then even further to that war, and then in Croatia there are also similar SS divisions, etc. So I've got another link here to the Going Direct paragraph, and let's just see what page that comes out to. Project Voltaire. So that's the Project Voltaire page. War on Terror, Alliance of MI6 CIA Banderites, New World Order that is being prepared under pretext of war in Ukraine, the war propaganda changes its shape, military industrial complex, oil, gas, and mining, and this is finance, insurance, and real estate. So those are Michael Hudson's, here they are here, main groupings in the oligarchy. So that's what that's linking to there. And then I had some stuff here about why people use the web, what they said they use the web, what the popular sites were. I did a blog about how big the internet was and basically how centralized it had become. That's what that link is to. Search engine market share. You can see, I mean, Google's got 91.5%. I mean, that may well have gone up from January 2022. I really have no idea, but you can see the others hardly get a look in. Then there's this old blog I did, which looks at the Google leaks, Zach Verhuri's, which is on Project Veritas, top visited sites, etc. This is a cryptocurrency called Aragon, which is it's a very good advert, but you know, basically how controlled they are or aren't, I mean, I really wouldn't know. This was a token which I posited for one of our businesses, so the other window is my current projects window, my day job, if you will. The first tab is instructive in that it speaks to yet another government narrative, which remains a narrative leading away from the target. So here we have the PM and Rishi Sunak tried to dodge self-isolation by claiming to be part of a pilot scheme. That's interesting. planning reforms. Boris Johnson outraged the Tory faithful with plans to tear up the planning system and pump development into liberalised zones of towns and cities. While many welcomed reform, the pressure was too much to bear and the Housing Secretary was sacked. His replacement, Michael Gove, appears to have shelved the plans. Now, that was Robert Jenrick that was sacked and Michael Gove was brought in. And there's another Housing Secretary now. I think we've been through two since then even. Never mentioned them there. Why big tech doesn't get the housing crisis. ChatGPT, artificial intelligence, what I call a kind of an algorithmic mindset. There we are, housing boom and bust. Decision to intervene, how the war in Bosnia ended. Well, that could be an interesting one to look at in terms of what may or may not happen in Ukraine next. Control of oil, energy exchange cartel. Democracy is finished. By democracy, of course, he meant private capitalism, the Lion and the Unicorn, which is a lesser known Orwell essay. What have that lot ever done for us? Plus Assange, plus the mem shows. Another blog there. Horizon 30th anniversary of the Far Side. That's something I wrote reviewing David Malone's 30th anniversary Far Side retrospective on the Horizon program's 30th anniversary. Here's my 16-1. What are the odds of that? The carbon currency end game analysis, which I'd worked on over the winter and Christmas 21 into 22. We need a new Chartist movement. I mean, all of this stuff is still kind of there. Gatekeeper or freedom fighter, you decide. Zizek and his mate Yanis Varoufakis. So it is interesting. The William Engdahl chat with Ian Crane. Engdahl quite clearly holds up Varoufakis as a sock puppet, a plant, a false hope or whatever. And then finally, here's Annie Machon. She basically went on the run with David Shayler. So they're both ex-MI6. Speaks a lot of sense. You see she's on RT here. That's Russian television, Russian state-owned media. Oh my God, maybe I'm a Russian bot. Looking at two sides of the story or whatever. And then at the bottom here, this blog layout offers related articles, and they seem to change. If I put a comment in, then they will change. So here we are, right? So this is me after the 2019 election. Prime Minister Johnson has been appointed by the British people to get Brexit done. Congratulations, Prime Minister Johnson. May I join you in your big one nation tent? I encourage others who have argued against and challenged Mr. Johnson's platform to do the same. Now, of course, after that, we had all of the January the 6th Capitol riot, insurrection or whatever. And there's a lot of fuss going on in the States with that at the moment. Tucker Carlson has been prevented from airing his latest going through the footage of what went on there. It seems that there are a few sensitivities around that Biden-Trump election. My own view is that both the 2019 UK election and the US election in 2020 are highly suspect. I think the postal vote in Britain is something that hasn't been looked into. The thing that really perked my suspicions of that up was the by-election that was held in the by-election, Sam, whatever she was called, Hartlepool, the Hartlepool by-election again, where the postal vote looked a bit dodgy to me, and no one really had picked up and looked at it, and I couldn't get and or find what was supposed to be on the returning officer's website, etc. Right, we're looking for a primary cause. What are you looking for? I can remember doing that. We'll have a quick look at that. Revolving misconceptions about the Nikolov and Zeller universal theory of climate, the iconoclasm and venality of Assange's persecution, end of cash, end of freedom, Now, Assange just doesn't get mentioned these days. And of course, it's a shame on so-called Western freedoms. I mean, don't forget, they hate our freedoms. They hate us for our freedoms and our democracies. And yet here you have Julian Assange still in Belmarsh. So the more it changes, the more it stays the same, it seems. So my latest blog here is The Devil's Excrement, 50 Things That Made the Modern Economy. That's a recent post. Let's just get back to the top here. Now that hasn't updated. Right, we've been through that, so I'm just going to refresh the browser here. There we are. So the latest one is this one, same damn tricks in the same damn way. In some cases, the same damn people. Now let's just crack on with that blog, which is open here, and I'll talk you through where I'm currently at right now with my thinking on all of this stuff. So let's just explain. This title here comes from a video which is from I'll open that further down, but it's about American attempts, Israeli attempts as well, to cause conflict with Iran. And there was a serving officer in the American Navy, in the intelligence side of it, who realized there was an attack on a ship in harbor, an American ship in harbor out that way. And it seems that it was what they call a lee hop, let it happen on purpose, as opposed to a me hop and make it happen on purpose. And this goes, I think she lives in New Zealand, if she's still there. And we'll get to that further down. So same damn tricks and same damn way, in some cases the same damn people. And I think that might even be a title I borrowed from Caitlin Johnson, who is quite a well-known writer. I think people like Whitney Webb have kind of taken over her mantle in a way. I think if Caitlin Johnson did more of a webcast, Whitney Webb in a way is the new Caitlin Johnson in my mind. PNAC, that's the Project for a New American Century. Zelikow rather, he actually wrote the 9/11 report into what went on, and then 9/11 to Nord Stream. So that's September 11th, 2001, Nord Stream. What date was the Nord Stream attack? And then the Augean stables, that's one of Hercules' labours, was to clean out the Augean stables. So what's this all about? There's Brigitte Macron and a picture with one of the Rothschild family that's involved with Rothschilds in France, who Emmanuel Macron used to work for. And this is an Emmanuel Macron article in Project Syndicate, which used to be edited by Gordon Brown, March the 4th, 2019. European citizens need to learn from the Brexit impasse and apply those lessons ahead and after the European Parliament election in May. That means embracing reforms that advance the three goals that lie at the heart of the European project. So I made a comment on that, which I think was taken down. Now, this is March the 5th, 2019. That really does say it all. Macron is beyond absurd in his absurd egotistical lack of self-awareness. And then there's a link to something called fairygodboss.com article Self-Aware. This is typical of his elitist cast of technocratic determinists. The neoliberal project is dead on the vine and morphing it into overt fascism and perpetual war of the boots on the ground kind seems to be the technocratic faction of the oligarchy's death rattle intent. Macron is irrelevant, as is George Soros and the NGO, that's non-governmental organisations, foundation illusion of free speech complex, wrong kind of green. The French people want Macron gone. The peoples of Europe want democracy and a celebration of national identities and cultures, language, customs and idiosyncrasies. The one-size-fits-all, do as we say, not as we do. Feudalism of the EU SSR has been rejected many times, yet the EU is a political project, but not a democratic one. And that is the problem, Mr. Macron. I do not call you Mr. President, as I do not think your regime is legitimate. So on. Austerity, enlargement and monetary union, the end of European democracy, not waving but drowning. So that's a blog I did on the 4th of February 2017. And then that is this blog here, which we just open. There's the Slogs Ayabato there. It's all bollocks, and that's official. So mentions, will Macron stand in Germany too, as heir apparent to a certain Austrian who did rather well there in the 1930s, I'm told. GMF, stop the steal. Ein Virus, Ein Folk, Ein Goose Step. Just me being puerile. Macron make 1984 fiction again. Project Syndicate commentary, 3 goals. So all the links are there. I mean, if you go. This is the Gilets jaunes protests. Anyway, let's just get back to where we were. This one here. So right then, so I did a Google search, which is, then you can open that, and this is a search, the search terms of which are Sir and Lady de Rothschild and Macron. Okay, it's Macron is a banker. He's an international global banker, and that's what Rishi Sunak was, and they're meeting today, and it's kind of interesting, isn't it? So that's what that is. And so there are a few sort of memory prompts here. There's Paul Mason, hooray for Macron. He's, in my view, a discredited left-wing commentator who clearly is a water carrier for the unelected ruling class in a way. So then there are two videos a bit like this one I've done previously. One explaining my blog, The Power Elite Analysis Motherload, which is 26 minutes long, so not overly long. And another one, Barbarians at the Gate, from flagging false positives to false flags. And that one is 1 hour and 2 minutes. It's a bit long, and I suspect this one is going to be fairly long. So that's kind of the setup context of what we're doing here. A year ago, what was current, what's current today, both on the Politics and Empire blog, but also on my blog. So this guy here, the dork from Cork, used to comment quite regularly on David Malone's Golem X1V blog. There's a famous, no, it's not famous. One I recall was how Ireland became Europe's offshore tart, which is something I think Caneen Keith, or Keith Caneen, I don't know this guy, just although I look at his Twitter feed because it's distributionist and social credit informed, and so he looks at the economy in a realistic rather than mythological or received wisdom sense, and although in my view there's always the danger when you get into one school of thought of the rule of the hammer taking over, i.e. if the only tool you've got a hammer, every problem starts to look like a nail. We all do it. So anyway, Devil's Excrement, this is my blog from yesterday, and I added in Twitter insiders are now saying there are too many trolls. This person here made an appearance on UK Column yesterday, or they discussed her. She's made a series of panorama programs about malcontents, such as myself, that would dare to criticize the establishment, the Westminster, the mainstream media bubble, the Westminster bubble, etc., or indeed the Brussels bubble. And here he is, Guy Verhofstadt. Again, self-awareness is not something I think that he's particularly strong on. But anyway, this is interesting. Just when Europeans thought we had a British PM who was more normal than his predecessors, the Tory party is back to breaking international laws and flying refugees to Rwanda. Is this really a message of Britain to the world? Verhofstadt is leading the charge to Africa. I mean, as an ex-Belgian president, and what the Belgians were guilty of in the Belgian Congo, people in glass houses, etc. And so after that, when I added in, they're talking about having a referendum for Texas seceding from the United States Union, and there are that blog there's got a number of pointers to Texans who'd like to do that about how Washington and the federal government may respond to such an ambition. So Texit and Brexit, people like the Mercers, and one thing I do look at with that is the Scottish independence and the attitudes of people like Verhofstadt to, say, Catalonian independence or Basque separatism, or in the Netherlands, Frisian separatism, or there are lots of places in Europe which kind of get the shitty end of the stick through the sort of the way that borders have been lumped together. The inconvenient people who don't fit in with Guy Verhofstadt and people like him with their idea of normal. So Crash Course Super Democracy, that's another old blog which is kind of relevant to this. And then here it is, this story on the BBC, Rishi Sunak to meet Emmanuel Macron, and let's just open that here, and it's by Katya Adler. I really like Katya Adler, I've got to say. I used to really like her reports on Brexit. She did one about the 5-star movement in Italy and stuff. Anyway, she's definitely worth reading, but this is about whether or not there's going to be some sort of a bromance, a romance fraternelle between these two clowns. We shall see. Rip Van Winkle wakes up in room 101 and interrogates ChatGPT. I saw that Noam Chomsky, the famous linguist, as well as kind of mutualism philosopher, points out that ChatGPT doesn't have real intelligence. I think he's right about that. But anyway, Brave New World, Kovac, blah blah blah. So I've added that one in there as well. And then we get here to Dork from Cork again. This is what a national drive to build houses in a so-called open economy will achieve. If we just open that again here, just to get a look at that picture. So this is what a national drive to build houses in a so-called open economy will achieve. Okay, so is it some sort of mortgage slavery metaphor? Yeah. Anyway, that's not. I put that one in there because that's kind of work for me. Just hold on. There we are. So there's that one there, and then UK house prizes. So this is a bit of optimism from the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, which is because less estate agents are reporting that things are getting bad. So things are getting bad less quickly, in less people's eyes or whatever. It's a pretty shit indicator, to be honest. But you know, any port in a storm. And this is my blog on the Everything Bubble and the Everything Bust prospects for UK housing and UK housing markets. And if you look at what's been happening in the States and all the rest of it, it's really hard to get a read on things at the moment. Things are an absolute mess. So anyway, that's the kind of the work element of this, and the Dork from Cork are very good on social credit, etc., and on social credit theories for why there are wars and why there's a thing called the gap between production and consumption. And I agree with the Dork from Cork on a lot of that stuff, but I'm not going to go into it now. But you'll see if you're interested. You know, where there's a real overlap in this idea of, well, the system clearly isn't doing what it says on the tin. That much is obvious. So then here we come here to the system not doing what it says on the tin, but what else might be happening. So this is the Dork from Cork saying, here is why I think the Brits stroke Dutch, not Yanks, was behind the gas pipe sabotage. They already sabotaged their own energy agri systems. For them, all that matters is income and their VOC corporations. This income requires scarcity. I'm not sure what VOC stands for. I mean, Shell ship large amounts of LNG from Peru. Now, seeing the Brits and the Dutch as separate from the Americans, or the North Americans, the USA, I mean, I've sort of said, well, Five Eyes, what about those? What about NATO? What about global capital and global supranational monopoly statism, the UN, the trilaterals, etc.? And then that leads to the Parallelism Analysis Motherlode, which is a blog I did based on Michael L. Chadwick's huge compendium, which carries on the research that Carol Quigley in Tragedy and Hope hung up his boots on in about 1966. I mean, I think after that he did publish a book called something about the Anglo-American establishment or whatever, which were not as ambitious as Tragedy and Hope. But this Chadwick book is very good. So I just sort of add in a few bits and pieces there, and then come to that manufacturing conflict, mind war games, mind war roadmap, blah blah, which is what we just went through. And then here we are. Here's Thierry Masson talking about the Straussians seek to turn Ukraine. So let's just open link. This is on Voltaire. Oh, so right, the Straussians seek to turn Ukraine conflict into religious war. 16th of March, 2022. Actually, there's no tag. Who wrote that one? I'm not sure. Anyway, right, and then back to devil's excrement, oil, energy, blah blah. Here's Boris the Barbarians at the Gate video that I did. This guy's been featured on UK Column before. He's the head of the UK Navy, and I say in the video he's not like a proper sailor. He's an academic, and frankly, I wouldn't follow him over the top anywhere. People like that, you'd be looking over your shoulder all the time. So Barbarians at the Gate. So that's that there. So that's a sort of a general context of the mess. And then let's just have a listen to this here now. So, right, okay. So what the hell is that all about? Let's have a look here. Right, so that is from 5 years ago. And it's on a local news channel in Manchester, New Hampshire, about a guy called Mike Gill. Right now, what the hell is that doing in the middle of this blog here? And what's it got to do with James Baker, Hillary Clinton getting the job done? Um, Okay, so right, I'm just gonna reinforce that that here. Let me just open this. So um, right, here we go. We are getting a bit laggy here, I'm afraid. This may be the best way to deal with this. Will actually be to just close a few of these windows. Close a few of these windows as we go along here. So we're looking at that one. Don't need that one. Don't need that one. Just done that. Right, it's Zellicoe that we're looking for, and there's a quote from Ian Crane. Link. So we just had that quote there. So here we are. So Ian Crane, extract from Harvard thesis, Zellicoe, and let's just. So, people and events that go into forming the public presumptions about its immediate past, the idea of public presumption is akin to the notion of public myth, but without the negative connotation of the word myth. Such presumptions are beliefs thought to be true, although not necessarily known to be true with any real certainty, and shared with the relevant political community. Extract from Harvard thesis of Philip D. Zellicoe. There's another quote actually from Donald Rumsfeld about known unknowns. And then, of course, you've also got the famous Karl Rove quote about actors in history, and how they say we create our own reality, and you guys just report it. All of that stuff. So that's what that so there it is again there. Um, okay, so this is the full um, Ken O'Keefe video. Um, okay, the evidence of 9/11 being an inside job. Uh, so, and we've also seen Zellicoe mentioned by Ian Crane. And the question is, what the hell is this Mike Gill stuff about? What's this Mike Gill stuff about here? What's this about a defamation lawsuit against some mortgage broker with an electronic billboard sort of saying stuff? Well, this is a Hillary Clinton. This is from her 2016 campaign against, for the White House. So there you go. That is the Clinton Foundation and Arkansas. Mike Gill is New Hampshire. The inside job aspects of 9/11, the Richard Grove whistleblowing, Mike Rupperput, similar thing. Rupperput is actually in that Crane video as well about peak oil being a myth or whatever, because Rupperput did write a book about peak oil after blowing the whistle on the financial shenanigans in the run-up, etc. This is an interesting little aside here. Blackstone acquires the debt on 7 World Trade Center in October 2000. So this is obviously less than a year before September the 11th. And there's a tab in the going direct paradigm here. So Mike Gill's website, State of Corruption, New Hampshire. This channel's been going for some time. And recently, Brendan O'Connell, Brendan Lee O'Connell, has been doing work on these allegations. So if we just look at, right, okay, so Blackstone acquires debt, World Trade Center. So if we just put in here, Brendan, right, Brendan O'Connell III. So here's Brendan here, okay, and this video here is The Great Game, A Family Civil War. So here's Steve Bannon, here's Benjamin Netanyahu, Donald Trump, Trump's brother-in-law, not a son-in-law rather, what's he called, Jared Kushner. So anyway, there are a bunch of other links here which are quite interesting. Now, right, so Halford Mackinder, that's the World Island theory. Brendan O'Connell, he does get mentioned in the blog some years ago, along with Tommy Robinson and Alison Shablow. And he was sent to prison for hate speech, etc., in Australia, and for anti-Semitism. Now, there's no question that Brendan O'Donnell is not the greatest fan of Israeli intelligence. Well, maybe he is of intelligence, but I can understand why he's painted that way. But nonetheless, he's got a tongue in his head, and he makes a lot of interesting and good points. So you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater, as it were. But he's taken up this case of this guy called Mike Hill. And then, you know, maybe Mike Hill is his own worst enemy. Maybe Brendan O'Connell is his own worst enemy. Maybe I'm my own worst enemy. But nonetheless, Mike Gill makes certain allegations about money laundering going to the very top of the New Hampshire political establishment. And it involves investigative journalism by Project Veritas and James O'Keefe. And it was at the time that all of that stuff was breaking and O'Keefe being booted out or dethroned from Project Veritas, that Brendan O'Connell started talking then about what was happening here. Now, this idea of corruption, sadly, it seems to be true that there's a lot of corruption in our politics, in our corporate affairs, and you know, it just seems to be there, and there seems to be smoke here, and no smoke without fire, etc. And so I put it in the blog here because it just seems to fit into the piece of you know, what the hell is going on? How do we explain the ongoing absurdity of life becoming this sort of wading through treacle kind of feeling? Well, of course, maybe it is this the establishment doesn't seem to have any interest in increasing the size of the pie, only their own particular slice of whatever pie is left. And, you know, it doesn't seem to make sense. You know, that's kind of all I'm saying, and not very well. But the idea that this corruption in New Hampshire, the corruption in US politics, the corruption in UK politics, the corruption in European Union politics, the corruption in Russian politics, Ukrainian politics, it seems to be absolutely everywhere. Australia, New Zealand, Canada. There just seems to be no bottom to the depths of this destructive ongoing absurdity. So yeah, you know, so I've put it in this blog here just to see what other people make of it. I mean, I the O'Keefe documentary, Ken O'Keefe, not James O'Keefe. This was a anonymous production on Whitewater scandal, etc. There's a good film called Primary Colors, actually, which is supposed to be based loosely on Bill Clinton or whatever. So those are there just as open questions. Then mendacity and duplicity of soldiers of war, truth, first casualty of war. So let's just have a little break here and listen to this. So that's the film Fair Game, and that's looking at the casus belli for the Second Iraq War, which was George Bush II. Then this is an exchange I had on a very taboo blog called Anafan, and I bumped into someone on that blog, someone who used to comment on Golem X1V and exchange pleasantries. That was about the Christchurch mosque attacks. And then there are some sort of tweet exchanges in here. And then this is the Iranian thing. So let's just listen to a little bit of this. Iranian 2007, the US tried to wage a war against Iran, and it was Gwyneth Todd who Um, I think she probably did avert World War Three. Um, so anyway, us just have a listen just to the first bits of this. Right, so this is the first Gulf War, and Ian Crane, again in the Myth of Peak Oil, don't forget that's made in 2007. He's talking about he talks about the first Gulf War, but also the second Gulf War. Um, and so the first Gulf War is where they turf out Saddam from Kuwait, and so that's the incubator scenes and all of this sort of thing. Whereas the second Gulf War was shock and awe, uh, which came after the 9/11 attacks. Um, so this has been going on for a long time, and people old as me will remember all the stuff about the Iraqi super gun. Again, these ongoing. So this is Zeliko's point about stuff that we think, oh yeah, yeah, that happened. It's often it's repeated over and over, uh, in fact, it's all a tall story. So, like the Skripal anniversary came up the other day, and people were talking about that, um, and it makes your brain ache because the it's it's the feeling of, oh my god, no, not that again. Are they still going on about that? What and it's what psychopaths do, isn't it? And it's what narcissists do. It's part of that sort of psychosis, or that psychological makeup, is that you don't realize the discomforture that you're putting other people in going over this the same ground that's already been even scoffed at or laughed at. And yeah, the sense of frustration when you follow these things over a long period of time, um, it is it really does get to the point you say, well, for goodness sake, just turn it in. Um, and what is a bit more? Right, so do watch that film because it gets into, you know, some of the really interesting stuff, and this is her telling her real story. It's not like the fictionalized version, the Fair Game one, which is a real story of stuff that really happened about the second Iraq War, but the first Iraq War, and this film tells about how a provocation against Iran is kind of on the cards, and it's a very powerful film, albeit that it's been made by the Iranian side. Now, what's quite interesting about Iran is that Brendan O'Connell has spent some time in Iran as well, and Israel as a state and Israeli people and Jewish people, you know, they don't all agree with each other. There's a left and a right in Israel, and there are non-Jewish people that live in Israel, and there's also the obviously then you've got Palestine. You've got Ken O'Keefe bit. Now he's an ex-Marine, and he was on the boat that got raided and a few people got killed or whatever. So there's a lot of taboo around all of this stuff, and how do you pick the bones out of that? What's really going on here? And I don't know. I'm not an expert. I mean, I've watched the Dershowitz debates with Chomsky about the two-state solution and all of that, and I mean they really kick off with each other, and it does cause a lot of anxiety when such entrenched arguments meet each other side. But that documentary is definitely worth watching. And the idea of the corruption in New Hampshire, I mean, the Iran-Contra thing is, I mean, that's another aspect of all of this, you know, Colonel Oliver North or whatever. I mean, so these ideas of corruption, these idea of dark money pools. So Catherine Austin Fitz talks about dark money and the corruption in the housing HUD, HUD, the American Housing Department that she was in. So this idea of how rotten things have got, how deep the graft goes in federal politics. Tamimimi Hall was famous in say the late 19th century as a you know how corrupted local politics had got, but it's just kind of joined up corruption now, and yeah, clearly, if you want, you know, you can't afford to have all this double dipping going on, frankly. I think Gandhi said there's enough in the world for human need, but there'll never be enough for human greed. So anyway, so it's a kind of I'm going to wrap it up now because obviously I'm still sort of thinking about all of these things, but this Mike Hill stuff and these other things, we're obviously in the middle of some sort of great paradigm shift, and so what's feeding into that? What's important? And I do think that this Gwyneth Todd film here, which you'll find on the blog if you look in the description, in the blog, whatever, is certainly So certainly well worth watching to take a starting point. And so just going back to the title here, so I've got the starting point is from 9/11 to Nord Stream, okay, Zelikow, PNAC, and the Augean stables, and then same damn tricks, same damn way, in some cases the same damn people. And so if we just get back down here now, so there's Mike Hill's channel, here's Brendan O'Connell's channel, and they're linked to. Right, Unit 8200. Now this is the Israeli. It's the same as our sort of 77th brigade or whatever. Well, I wouldn't say it's the same. It's actually way more competent. You know, hi guys, they've got a job to do too, obviously, and you know, we mustn't be naive about things. You know, corruption is one thing. State corruption is a terrible thing. But again, you have to be careful about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. That's you know, that's all I'm saying here. I'm not picking a side. Have I got a dog in the fight? Well, no. I suppose we all have to a certain degree, even if we just want to be left alone to get on with life. You know, whatever. So anyway, reading between the lines, and so a bunch of blogs here, between the lines. This is between the lines climate change, between the lines of going direct and the COVID purpose, between the lines, the communication playbook, wrong kind of green, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, and then between the lines, the Rump Parliament, reference to the UK, and then some quotes about the Augean stables here. Finishing off with this quote from Henry David Thoreau, who wrote the book about Walden, and Walden 2 is a book about, I'll find it in a minute, about behaviorism by B.F. Skinner, a novel. And again, that's really worth reading. But anyway, here's Henry David Thoreau. How many a poor immortal soul have I met, well nigh crushed and smothered under its load, creeping down the road of life, pushing before it a barn 75 feet by 40, its Augean stables never cleansed, and 100 acres of land, tillage, mowing, pasture, and woodlot. The portionless, who struggle with no such unnecessary inherited encumbrances, find it labour enough to subdue and cultivate a few cubic feet of flesh. Powerful stuff. And let me just do this here. Walden. So Walden 2, prevention or intervention, from nowhere and utopia. What's the point? The objective, the purpose. Brian Walden is an old commentator. Here's an interview he did with James Goldsmith. But I'm referring to this, B.F. Skinner, Walden 2, including Walden 2 Revisited, a preface 28 years after its publication. Now, right, chapter 3, sheep. We set out across the field to the south, skirting a fairly large flock of sheep. The sheep were kept together by a single length of string, carrying occasional bits of cloth like a kite tail, and supported on poles stuck into the ground to form a square fold. Rogers commented on this insubstantial arrangement. We wanted an expanse of cropped grass in our front yard, Fraser explained, but it's too close to the buildings for a regular sheep pasture. It's used a great deal by the children, in fact. We all use it as a sort of lawn. By the way, he turned particularly to Castle and me. Do you remember Veblen's analysis of the lawn in the theory of the leisure class? I do indeed, said Castle. It was supposed to represent a bit of choice, but up conspicuously unconsumed pasture. Castle's diction was always precise, but occasionally, as in this instance, he burlesqued himself with added delicacy. That's right, said Fraser with a smile. Well, this is our lawn, but we consume it indirectly, of course, through our sheep. And the advantage is that it doesn't consume us. Have you ever pushed a lawnmower, the stupidest machine ever invented for one of the stupidest of purposes? But I digress. We solved our problem with a portable electric fence. It could be used to move our flock of sheep about the lawn like a gigantic mowing machine, but leaving most of it free at any time. At night, the sheep are taken across the brook to the main fold, but we soon found that the sheep kept to the enclosure and quite clear of the fence, which didn't need to be electrified. So we substituted a piece of string, which is easier to move around. What about the new lambs? Barbara asked, turning her head at the slight angle and looking at Fraser from the commas of her eyes. They stray, Fraser conceded, but they cause no trouble and soon learn to keep with the flock. The curious thing is, you will be interested in this, Boris, the curious thing is that most of these sheep have never been shocked by the fence. Most of them were born after we took the wire away. It has become a tradition among our sheep never to approach string. The lambs acquire it from their elders, whose judgment they never question. It's fortunate that sheep don't talk, said Castle. One of them would be sure to ask why, the philosophical lambkin, and some day a sceptical lambkin would put his nose on the string and nothing would happen, and the whole sheepfold would be shaken to its very foundation, I added. And after him the stampede, said Castle. I should have told you, said Fraser soberly, that no small part of the force of tradition is due to the quiet creature you see yonder. He pointed to a beautiful sheepdog, which was watching us from a respectful distance. We call him the Bishop. Wuhan and his dog. If you have been listening, thank you. And that's Roger over and out.